communism, there were some special prisons which were laboratories in which they believed that they can create a communist personality. When you said, I still believe in God, in 5 minutes, you were full of blood.
Nestled in the rolling hills of northern Romania is an artistic wonder, Voronezh Monastery. Because of its religious beauty, Voronezh is called the Sistine Chapel of the East. Its frescoes were painted 500 years ago to tell the story of the Christian faith. A closer look at these ancient works of art tells the history of a people. Invasion by enemy forces is a disturbing theme. The Ottoman Turks were the first of many who tried to destroy the culture and people of Romania. Moses can be seen accusing them of their war crimes. Their punishment? Eternal torture. Because of its abundance of natural resources, Romania has long been a favorite target of the latest conqueror. Some of these looters favored grain and others sought gold. The Turks attacked from the east, the Germans from the west, and the Russians again from the east. It's estimated that post-World War II Russian Soviets seized $2 billion of labor, natural resources, and manufactured goods. Joseph Stalin's tyranny was at times aided by the Romanian government as they participated in the destruction of their own country. Millions of Romanians suffered through the oppression, but as World War II ended, the nightmares of many young men and women were just beginning. In 1949, thousands of young Romanian intellectuals, future professionals, and practicing Christians were systematically rounded up for brainwashing. They were imprisoned in Pitesti, Romania, in what one author describes as a place controlled by anti-humans. The brutality in Pitesti was called re-education because that was the goal of the Stalinists, to re-educate their victims away from free thinking, away from family, away from God, and towards communism. It was an experiment that went beyond torture. Dr. Nicu Ionita, Father George Calciu, and Father Roman Bragg are three survivors of the Gulag of Pitesti.
I studied at the university in Bucharest to be a teacher of Romanian language and literature, and I started being a teacher in a high school in Bucharest. When the communism came, they didn't like my method because they introduced a Marxist interpretation of everything, Marxist materialistic interpretation. I didn't want to lie my students, so I continued until they arrested me.
I studied 2 years the School of Medicine in Bucharest, and at the end of the second year I was arrested.
How did the arrest come about? Did they take several students, or was it a random selection? Or?
No, you know, generally they made they arrested a whole generation. I mean, intellectuals, priests, peasants. I mean, peasants with a special social position, you know, in the country, to make a gap between the old generation and the new generation. And this is gap we had with the students. We had a very important role because they knew we were the generation of transmission of the values of the old generation to the new generation. So they cut this connection between us and the following generation.
Prima imagine, să vă spun altceva, prima imagine a fost orașul Pitești. De unde am fost transferați în perioada asta de multe ori dintr-o închisoare în alta, eram extrem de bine păziți și totul se făcea în secret, pentru ca lumea să nu știe ce se întâmplă cu noi și câți deținuți sunt și cum arată. Când s-a oprit trenul, vagonul dubă la Pitești, nu știam că este Piteștiul, eram obișnuit așa, trenul este oprit în afara orașului și de acolo suntem îmbarcați în camioane cu acoperite și duți la închisoarea respectivă. Surpriza a fost următoarea. Când m-am dat jos din vagon, am văzut peronul gării și gara Pitești. Niciun om, înconjurată toată numai de armată. Asta a fost prima surpriză. Și un domn, un tovarăș, cum era atunci, foarte fercheș, bine făcut, în sfârșit, și de o aroganță extraordinară, mi s-a spus, nimeni nu vorbește, nimeni nu se uită nici în stânga, nici în dreapta, pentru că am dat ordine să se tragă. Încolonarea, ne-am încolonat și am pornit pe jos de la gară și până la închisoare prin oraș. Asta a fost cea mai mare surpriză. Gândeam, dacă într-adevăr se face acest gest, înseamnă că regimul este stăpân pe situație și nu se mai teme de nimic.
After the Second World War, the Soviet Union used many methods of suppression and torture. The re-education in Pitești was one of the most severe. In his book, The Anti-Humans, author D. Baku explained, to be given special attention was the destruction of love for family in order to completely isolate the victim in his own misery. Cut off from his history, faith, and family, the ultimate step in re-educating him was to destroy his personality. This was the most painful step of all and was called unmasking.
Piteștiul este un fenomen special în această constelație nefericită a spațiului concentrațional românesc. Pentru că acolo s-a încercat un fel de spălare pe creier a celor care erau deținuți. Trebuie spus că acest experiment a durat doar 3 ani, din 49 până în 52, și a fost oprit tocmai din cauza monstruozității lui și a protestelor venite mai ales din străinătate. S-a auzit despre ceea ce se întâmplă acolo. La Pitești erau deținuți oameni tineri, oameni educați, de diferite religii, cu diferite profesii, și s-a încercat aducerea lor pe linie dreaptă, adică alinierea lor la doctrina comunistă, prin distrugerea, în fapt, a tuturor valorilor în care ei crezuseră anterior. Și ideea experimentului a plecat de la faptul că acești oameni au fost în stare să învețe, deci au această disponibilitate către studiu și către formare, și așa cum au fost învățați să creadă în unele lucruri, vor fi dezvățați să creadă în acele lucruri și obișnuiți să creadă în altceva. Asta a fost ideea de bază. Iar ca metodă de lucru s-a folosit tortura.
In communism there were some special prisons which were laboratories, so to call them, laboratories in which they believe that they can create a communist personality. And they used all the methods. For example, hospital for mental diseases, they came with psychiatrists, doctors were very important, communist doctors, experimented in Russia. They came to give you special drugs and to say, okay, you are crazy because you are not communist, or you are crazy because you believe in God, or look at you.
What were they trying to accomplish at Pitești?
You know, there are 2 points of view. One is the political intention, and the other one is this eternal fight between good and evil. So, because we are young people, we had some principles, we are very faithful, and the spiritual opposition perhaps is more important than the material opposition. The evil part They knew exactly where to hit. And so they tried to destroy our soul, to destroy our connection, our trust to one another. And they succeed to do individuals from each of us, not a person, an individual. By torture, by isolation, by killing us, by by pressure, until we felt that we were losing our mind. Many of us died. Many of us became mad. But in some of us, the good triumphed.
The prisoners of Pitesti endured sleepless nights, beatings, starvation, psychological torture, and profanities against their Orthodox Christian beliefs.
Spațiul carceral cel mai cumplit și fără discuție că a fost Piteștiul, camera 1 subsol la Pitești, în care am stat 6 luni de zile sub teroare. Am stat 1 an de zile în camera asta, dar 6 luni numai sub teroare. Pentru că în afară de bătăile acestea, mai erau cu totul altceva, Doamne, erau eforturile la care eram supuși. Eforturile erau extraordinare. În ce constau aceste eforturi? Trebuia să facem manejul pe jos, în 4 labe și să înconjurăm spațiul dintre priciuri. Cât o oră, 2, 3, 4, până când cădeai jos. Și când cădeai jos, torționarii stăteau, colegii noștri, de fapt, stăteau în jurul nostru cu ciomezile și stăteau cu piciorul sau cu ciomagul să mergi mai departe. Și acest manej simplu a fost mai ușor de suportat, dar a fost altceva, a fost manejul dublu sau cu sarcină. Adică trebuia să porți în spate pe unul, tot așa, 1, 2, 3, 4 ore, asta nu mai conta. Sau deci un efort extraordinar. Sau somnul nu era supravegheat, trebuia să dormi într-o anumită poziție. Ori această poziție, în general, în timpul somnului,
nu ți-o poți controla.
Un grup muscular, așa, care îți menține poziția, la un moment dat obosesc, pentru că sunt niște fenomene fiziologice. Și obligatoriu în timpul somnului, fiecare om la 5 minute, 20 de minute trebuie să-și schimbe poziția, ca să intre alt grup de musculi în funcție ca să-ți mențină poziția. Ori noi nu aveam voie să facem nici acest lucru. Sau bătăile la tălpi. Erau teribile, pentru că te puneau pe prici și te băteau, te făceau cu rândul până când se rupea ciomagul acela. Sau altceva, culcări. Eu am făcut 1000 de culcări. Au stat lângă mine și 1000 de culcări. Și eram 3. Eu eram cel mai mic, erau al doilea și al treilea lângă mine. Cum culcările trebuia să le faci de sus, să te dai drumul jos, nu pe mâini. De sus să te dai pe ciment. Al doilea peste mine, al treilea peste mine. După ce făceam 100, treceam și schimbam. Am făcut 1000 de culcări. Și după ce am făcut 1000 de culcări, m-au întins pe prici și m-au bătut 3 inși până când s-au obosit ei.
Because many of the prisoners were of the Orthodox faith, they were forced to reenact the liturgy. Profanities replaced liturgical words, and human feces were substituted for Holy Communion. But perhaps the worst tortures of Pitesti were the betrayal of friends. After months of severe punishment, Romanian prisoners were promised freedom if they would help to re-educate a fresh group of younger inmates. Romanians were now torturing Romanians.
On 6th of December started everything with a shock. With a shock, this was a physical torture, that we were under the bed all within 5 minutes, full of blood and everything. But that is nothing. That is bearable. I knew that spring came, and Easter came, and Palm Sunday and everything, for what they were doing there. They took the prisoners and they played some play, so to say, liturgically, because all of them were Orthodox. And this was not done by the official officers of the prison. They put the students to torture each other, because that was the method.
They turned them against each other?
They took one group who disappeared for half a year, and they came completely brainwashed, and they said, we don't want to die in prison. They promised to them, if you do this, you will be liberated. That was a lie, because nobody was liberated. And they put them to torture their own colleagues in prisons.
You mentioned that part of this was trying to steal the soul, or part of it was trying to turn your friends against one another.
Yes.
Was this through physical torture or more of mental things?
They started always by physical torture.
They started with physical
Absolutely,
torture.
Yeah, absolutely. So they succeeded to terrorize us, to frighten us. And afterwards they start with moral pressure, but always they accompanied the moral pressure with physical pressure. We were obliged to denounce everything.
And there was a position, a special physical position in which you remember everything. This was the position. 6 months I was there.
You would just have to sit there?
Exactly. What was the strength, their point? To keep yourself at the limit between normal and abnormal. And nobody can stay here, you know.
How does one live in such terror and fear and not literally go insane?
Many became insane. Many committed suicide. Many died because of tortures. But when this torture stopped, we started to recover little by little. We need years to recover, you know. Today, driving the car, if a policeman stopped me, I felt all the terror rebirthed in me, in myself, you know. Somewhere in my side, very deeply, this terror still exists.
In the spring of 2001, Sorin Feraru was an art student in his hometown of Pitești, Romania. He was commissioned by survivors of the Pitești prison to create paintings depicting the torture experience. His first encounter with the prisoners was beyond his imagination.
They were very anxious to tell me the story, and I was like, wow, what is this about? I couldn't believe it, you know, that happened. You know, I used to pass that place every day going to school. I never knew what was there, you know. And remember, yeah, we spent a couple of hours listening to the story. It was unbelievable. At least for a young guy like me, it was like pulled from a movie.
What was your vision for creating these paintings?
I wanted to create something different. I mean, because this is what they told me. You know, we want something that will get as close as possible to what happened there.
What were their impressions when they saw these paintings?
Oh yeah, that was very interesting. I remember I had these Germans, I think they were 6 or 7, that came to my parents' house, because I did this at my parents' house, and they walked in. I invited them in the studio, and for a couple of minutes nobody said anything. I was scared. I was like, my God, they don't like it. Something's wrong. You know, it's not what it's supposed to be. It's, you know. And then they started talking. He says, this is what happened. My God, it's unbelievable. You know, and I hope I'm not mistaken, but one of Germans started crying. You know. And it was amazing. I was very happy because I got at least close to what they were thinking.
Throughout history, torture has been inflicted for many reasons. It's often used to force a confession or to obtain information. It can be a sadistic way of keeping prisoners physically and mentally in a form of slavery. Some totalitarian governments use torture as a scare tactic for potential dissidents. And then there was the prison of Pitesti, where torture was used as a communistic tool to totally transform the personality. Jerry Labor, co-founder of Human Rights Watch, says, "Torture forces us to imagine things that should be unimaginable, to think thoughts that should be unthinkable. Perhaps a better understanding of torture can inspire us to rid society of it."
As an exercise physiologist, Sean Foy helps people heal their bodies. To help us better understand the tortures of Pitești, we asked him to experience a few moments of the physical and mental pain of the prisoners.
I've got about 30 pounds on my back, and again, I've only been on this one foot for a very short period of time. As I was standing there, I was imagining what these prisoners must have gone through. Even mentally, I started feeling a sense of hopelessness in that 3 minutes because I wasn't in control of the weight. Knowing that someone was going to dictate to me how long to hold it was extremely uncomfortable. But I think from a physical standpoint, the acute discomfort in the lower leg was very pronounced. I could feel that literally within the first 60 seconds. But then as I began to adjust my foot and my leg, I began to brace myself, and my hip really began to hurt. So I could feel the compensation too. Lower back pain began to occur. I began to feel my shoulders moving. The compensation, I think, is really important because muscles slowly begin to spasm. And that's where I feel that ultimately I can only imagine what these individuals must have experienced holding this amount of weight or similar weight for hours upon hours. I can't imagine what they must have gone through.
For what these prisoners went through physically and mentally, what are the long-range difficulties?
Yeah. Generally, you'll see musculoskeletal problems occurring, lower back problems, for example, degenerative disc problems, and then also forms of arthritis, bursitis, tendinitis, all inflammatory problems with the joints. And beyond that, generally what occurs is because of the physical pain, there are other problems that occur, other risk factors that can occur. Generally because of injury or problems with joint discomfort, inactivity occurs, which leads to muscular atrophy, which can lead to higher cholesterol, higher blood pressure, heart disease, cancer. These are chronic conditions that I don't think we think about from an individual that may experience torture or some type of pain or imprisonment, but this can affect them for years and years and years long after the original torture.
What happened with Pitești? Pitești stopped because one evaded, and evaded from the country too. And at the BBC was something there about a special prison in Pitești called Pitesti in Romania, and they stopped it immediately because in communism they kill, they torture, but they don't want anybody to know. When what to say, when this is known, they immediately find what we say in English language with a goat.
Oh, a scapegoat.
Scapegoat.
Find a scapegoat,
and
yes.
that happened because they condemned and they executed the director of the prison, the doctors. One of them was even the doctor of the city there, of the hospital, and they condemned all the wardens there. Everybody who knows shall disappear because communism doesn't, they didn't want to have bad things in their archives.
Dr. Camelia Doru is founder of the Romanian ICAR Foundation, which has the specific purpose of helping victims of torture. Her years of medical experience have shown that beatings are often merely the first step in the torture process.
Însă cele mai grave urmări sunt totuși cele consecințele psihice. Și aici fiecare a încercat să facă față acestor drame cum a putut. Și deși intenția călăilor a fost să distrugă credința acestor oameni, iată ei nu au reușit. Și o să întâlniți foarte mulți oameni care au supraviețuit și care vă vor spune că totuși prin credință s-au reechilibrat, în ciuda, repet, a eforturilor călăilor de a le distruge credința.
How does one struggle with those inner pain and not let it control their life? What advice could you give?
I think the advice is to try to forgive. Going out from the prison, I started to put on the paper my memories. And remembering events, person, I felt that the wrath was invading myself. And I put an end to this. And now, after that, I see I have in my soul the pain. When I remember the things, I still I have this terror in myself. But really, I forgot the name of my torturers. I forgot the name of the officer of the Securitate interrogated me. Second time when I was arrested, I refused to read the papers, just not to see the name of the officer. So I don't know who interrogated me the second time. I don't remember also the first time. God helped me to forget everything, you know.
Father, how is it that you went through all of this and did not become a bitter or a cynical man?
Oh.
How did that happen?
Thank God, and God bless them. If they are still alive, some of them, I forgave them at that time. Do you know, there is sure, you have to experience that. When you suffer a little, you become hateful, and you hate them, you keep revenge. And when you suffer a lot, you forgive everything.
Why is that?
Well, Jesus on the cross was forgive them, Father, because they don't know what they do. It's the same that happens to you. You have the same feeling that they are insulting you, torturing you, and then you look at them and you realize that they don't know what they are doing. We forgive them and we want them to become, to come to God and to become people.
After years of enduring the evils of Pitesti, many of the young men were released, only to be arrested again. This time the punishment was years of solitary confinement.
So in Pitesti was very, very hard to see the positive part. We were just survival was. But later they put me in solitary confinement. And I was in solitary confinement a long time. And that was my positive experience of prison.
The solitary confinement was different than the Pitesti experience.
Each one isolated.
Okay.
Because they had the idea that if the intellectuals are isolated without books, without paper, without pencil, they will become beasts. But doesn't happen that. Doesn't happen. It is a glory to be like this, because sometimes we are the slaves of the books. If you are outside, you are not yourself. You don't even ask, who am I? You are you read a lot. You are made out of quotations, you know, here and there. You are not yourself. But there, where was no perspective to go out, where just you were in between the four walls, you had to go somewhere. Because the human spirit is explorer. You have to go somewhere. Then what happens to me that I didn't experience even in my family, that was very good Christian family. Churchgoers, they prayed, but they were normal people. That solitary confinement was wonderful. I discovered myself there.
Decades of bloodshed have left a disturbing mark on the face of the Romanian people. This wall in Bucharest commemorates the victims of the Pitesti prison. It serves as a tombstone for prayers and remembrances. Loved ones gather here often.
I think will not be a bad idea, to make this more public, what happened there, and because a lot of people can learn from this. They can learn what certain regimes can do to people, like what Nazis did to the Jewish people. I know this was not to the same scale, but the way they did it was so bad that I think people should learn from this.
Father Roman Bragg lives at this monastery in Rives Junction, Michigan. He says that in his old age, God is giving him back the years that the communists stole from him. Like his friend Father George Calciu, Father Roman is a role model and spiritual father.
Of course, I'm looking at Father Roman, for example. He's 84, and every day, I'm wondering, how much longer he's gonna live. Also, I'm kind of worried, who's gonna be my next confessor, who's gonna guide me in this world, and to whom I can, share my thoughts, the intimacy of my soul,
For me personally, the example is Father Roman. Yes, a man who has suffered so many years, and at his age now, that he is full of life, full of optimism, and full of joy. The joy that he has in his heart, it radiates. It really it catches on.
These men have been like fathers. What will happen as time passes and they leave the earth? What will happen to the culture?
God will provide, It's always been like that, in times of needs. In times of needs especially, God, put into the world, more people like this, to preserve the faith, to strengthen the people,
As for Romania's future, will they be attacked again from the east or west? Will there be lasting peace in Eastern Europe?
I think God used the Satan in communism to bring a luminous era that I believe very much now in Russia, in Romania, in Czechoslovakia, Poland. I think God selected these people to prepare them for something, for the light that is coming.